Hi, I'm Ben Wojdyla. This is Saturday Mechanic. Today we're going to be upgrading the shocks. The first step in taking the shocks out is to actually take the bolts out of the shock tower. Most cars have their shock towers in the trunk up towards the front. This one we took a little bit of trim out and we can get at it now. So I'm going to go ahead and take those bolts out right now. So now that we've loosened the bolts in the trunk, we can start work down here in the suspension. We put the car up, obviously, and taking the wheel off. Now we can see what we're really working on. There are two ways really to tell if your shocks have gone bad. First is when the car's on the ground with the wheels on. If you push down on the bumper right over the corner and the car bounces too many times, twice is usually too much. What you really want to see is like a full bounce and then a slight settle. That's perfect. Or if you look at these shocks, you can see that the dust cover is all blown up, there's oil all over the place, so that means the seals are bad and the shocks are definitely due for replacement. Since we're going to replace them, that gives us an opportunity for an upgrade, and that's what we're going to do. Before we get to that though, we have to get this whole unit out, and that means taking the suspension apart. And the first thing we're going to do with that is take the anti-roll bar off. All right, so we're going to start here. Take this link from the anti-roll bar off. Taking this off because this will let the suspension slouch a little bit easier and it'll give us clearance to pull the damper off. While we're working away, I should probably put my safety glasses on, and I'm going to grab my big breaker bar next because we're going to pop off the bolt at the bottom of this shock. They're called shocks, but really they're dampers. The objective is to damp out all the oscillations from the spring. Without them, you hit a pothole and your car is just going to bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce. But with them in, get a nice smooth ride. Obviously, if it's a lot tighter, you're going to want to grab your ratchet to do this after you've used your breaker bar. But since this one's just hand tight, we can do it by hand. Let's see if we can pull that out now. Not quite. What we're going to do now is unbolt the top of the knuckle now to make this a little easier. This is the knuckle. It holds the bearing, and the bearing is attached to the brakes and the discs and all the end of the wheel here. And it also hooks the lower control arm to the upper control arm. And it's just got one bolt running through a bushing. So we'll grab our wrench and our ratchet and take those off. Set that aside. Should be able to wiggle this out now. Should being the operative term. What you never want to do is hit the end of this bolt without something on it. Because otherwise you will damage the threads and you will never, ever get it back on. So if we tap this, the nut on, you probably pull this out. All right, here we go. So now we're all loose. Let's see if we can get this bolt out of the bottom of the damper now. All right, with this bolt loose, just pull that out, and this comes straight out. Now we get to take this apart. All right, with the shock and spring off, now the next thing we need to do is get this old busted shock out, replace it with this nice new one. This is really a two-man job, so I have Larry Webster here, who happens to be my boss and the owner of the Miata, so if something breaks, well,
my fault.
We run away from him. The way to do this first is to grab one of these spring compressors. Now this is the kind that you can get at an auto parts store that you rent for practically nothing, but mechanics nickname these things Widowmakers because they're kind of dangerous.
So these spring compressors, they go on here and they squeeze the spring. So to squeeze it enough so this is free, we can take it out, is somewhere around the order of 400 or 500 pounds of force. So if these would slip off, the spring will recoil to dramatic effect. And if you're in the way when it takes off, you're gonna get hit. So some auto parts stores will rent you, I don't know what you call this one. It's a very serious tool.
Right, it's a lever action beast is what it is. So we're gonna put this on, and it's gonna take a little bit of wrestling, but this is the safer way to do it.
Yeah, it won't slip off. Okay, I got that one. Off the coil spring as you compress the spring.
Here,
let me
hold
get this
side.
Got that
Got it?
one, yep.
All right, so when you get these on, look at these have pins in them. These, when you push them through, here, I need to lower it just a little bit if you can.
Okay.
Ah. Nope, that's not gonna go.
You got it, come on. See the pin's going in. Yeah, there you go. Here, why don't we try spinning it a little bit?
Let's see.
All right, now try it there. I'm telling you.
There we go. There's one. The other one here.
Hang on, let's rotate
Just a little bit this way. Oh, there we go. See, if you push these pins in, now that locks the spring in place.
So we're going to tighten this bolt, and these arms are going to pinch. It's like a
That
lever.
bolt there. So we'll grab our electric impact driver to do that.
Yeah, this makes the job much safer and much easier.
Still the scariest part of the job, though.
Yeah. So you're trying to compress the spring enough so that this cap is free at the top of the spring, and I think it is.
It's pretty
there.
loose.
Yeah.
There we go. See, it's rotating freely now.
So now there's a nut that holds in the top of the shock to this cap. It's called, what do they call it, a bearing cap? Or?
I have no idea. Yeah, bearing cap in the front, but on the back, I think it's just a shock nut. The trick is there's nothing really holding that down. In here, it's just a rod in the shaft, and the hard part is getting that nut loose in there. So what we're going to grab is our air tool, or our air impact wrench now, and using that, we can get that nut loose. So
yeah, that'll spin it really quick. It's kind of like a shock load to take this nut off. Well, we could loosen the spring tension a little bit.
Got it.
Go. Okay.
All right, so there's the nut. Keep that close at hand, you'll reuse that. And so here's the cap here. We're gonna actually have to, this hole that the top of the shock goes through, we're actually gonna have to bore out ever so slightly.
Right.
Because the shaft on the new shock is bigger.
Now lift it. So we're gonna reuse the spring. This is the shock body. You can see it's all filled with oil because it's been leaking.
Actually,
now,
it's empty of oil.
You can see how it doesn't spring back up. It just stays down.
For comparison,
The new one.
there's the old, new one, and that springs back in place.
There's resistance to move the rod in this one here because it's blown out. There's
Yeah, if you watch the top of it, how easy it is. This just goes whoop. That's a dead spring, or dead shock.
Okay, so this is junk. First, we have to, I'll show you what I mean. So this shock rod goes through the top of this hole here. But one of the modifications you have to do to use these shocks is drill a little hole. Now we're replacing the Miata shocks with ones that actually offer some adjustability and are just a fair bit stiffer. When you want to make a change like that or a modification, it's a little tough to know what to use. Mazda actually makes it pretty easy. They have a program called Mazda Speed Performance, which has high performance parts. But for this one, we went to a shop that specializes in Miatas. It's called Fly Miata. We said, look, we want to make a little change. We don't want to destroy the ride of the car, but we want it to be a little sharper when we turn the wheel. What should we do? And they said, okay, leave the stock springs, but get these Coney shocks because they offer some simple adjustments that can help. One is you can adjust the ride height. That's how high the body sits off the wheels. And you can also adjust the damping in 3 positions. But it uses the standard springs and the mounts, so they're easy to install. They're not that expensive. They're about 120 a piece. And they also suggested what these are. These are called bump stops. And essentially when a shock bottoms out, that means when the wheel goes as far up as it can in the wheel well, it engages this, which is like a secondary spring. And it's a little bit stiffer and more progressive than the standard one, which is this one. So when you're cornering really hard and you're at the end of your travel, it should make the car, I guess you probably make it a little bit sharper, probably what it is.
It probably wouldn't, it'd be a little bit more predictable too.
Yeah, a little more predictable. So essentially this shaft is larger. We're gonna have to make a little modification to the top of our shock top. So why don't you go ahead and drill that thing out. Now we've put, cutting oil in here like usual. We've got a 12mm bit.
Oh.
I just use faster. There you go.
All right.
You got a rag anywhere?
All right.
Let's just work that out. Let's just
So now test fit the shock to make sure it goes through.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Ooh. Not quite. Give a little bit more. A little bit more love, maybe.
It's called fine tuning.
Well, that cleaned out, we can now get on to reassembling things. We're gonna put this shock back into the clamp, just like it was before.
Now you notice too, we're clamping at the bottom where the bolt goes through. You don't want to clamp on this shock body because there's a very precise piston that goes up and down in the oil here. You don't want to damage it.
We've decided to stick with the factory ride height, which is why this C-clip is right up here. This is a new spring perch which goes on, just like that.
This is just a little dust shield that goes on the top.
Our new jounce bumper goes on top.
So we have a washer here that I've cut to precisely fit on there.
And now we get the beast back into the picture.
The spring back on.
All right. All right, that's gonna be hairy.
Okay, you hold it. I'll
Okay.
get the other stuff. Let me get this. Okay. No, it's a new.
Oh, new bolt? All right.
Yeah. So what I did is, before I did this, I ran the nut down the threads to make sure there was no burrs or anything that might impede its movement. That's a big word, isn't it?
Back to the impact for this one.
Yeah, we're just gonna buzz it out carefully. Go the right direction.
That feels about done.
It does, is it? Yeah. So
All right.
you can tell the lock washer is nice and compressed. Now this is not, we're safe now. This cap is locked on. This spring can't go anywhere. We're still gonna be real careful when we take the tension off the spring compressor, but we're out of the danger zone, as we like to say.
Most of it anyway.
Yeah, ready?
You gotta make sure that the spring stays within the perches while you're doing this too, here and here.
Ready?
Yep. All right.
All right.
Scary part's over. Now we just gotta wrestle this contraption off, which is no small feat.
Where's the
Sometimes.
pry bar? There we go. Yeah, there's not really a recipe for this. This is just what we found that works for this one.
I don't know if that one's gonna come right, by the way.
Oh, right.
Yep.
All right, that's it. I'm gonna let you take it from here.
All right, yes. All right, so all finished. We're gonna put this back on the car. So we've got it all back together. The scary part's done. We get to put it back in the car now, which is just the reverse of what we did when we took it out. So we'll take the shock and put it in the bottom control arm first, and stick the bolt in there to retain everything. All right, grab our ratchet. we're going to grab the torque spec out of the service manual, and we've got it all back together, to torque it down to spec. When you're talking suspension, you don't really want things out of spec, so that's what we'll start with. Next thing you do, if you keep up with our cadence, you want to take this upper knuckle bolt out, set that to the side. With the shock and spring in place now is the next part, which is kind of a pain in the butt, but part of the deal. What we're going to have to do is align this shock tower, these bolts at the top of the shock tower, with the holes they go into up here. At the same time, we're going to have to align top of the knuckle with the upper control arm and put a bolt through it. So it's not exactly the easiest task. I'm going to have to use my whole body and my arms in here to get it all aligned. So you might not see a whole lot. All right, so it's aligned up at the top. You can hear those bolts in there. So now I'm going to get under the car and push up, pull down. Whew. We got that bolt in place. So now we're going to grab the nut that goes on the other end and run that down. All right, just finger tight like that, and then maybe a couple of twists with our ratchet. All right, with that upper bolt done, we're going to move on to the anti-roll bar bolt. Very similar, just take that off. I'm going to line these up. Hopefully. There we go. Make sure they'll get the lock washer on first if it has one. And we're only going most of the way. We're going to want to torque this one down too. All right, so now we can grab our torque wrench. We pulled the torque spec out of our service manual, and there we go, right at 35. Now we're going to start on the other one here. This, the anti-roll bar link is 30 pound-feet. So we're going to, I'm going to need to reposition myself. And make sure that when you're using this kind of wrench, you hold the little lever right at the midway point. There you go. Otherwise, you'll get an inaccurate reading. All right, so we're going to do this shock bolt last. Each bolt's got a different torque spec, so make sure to check your manual for all of them. When you're using this tool, keep in mind too that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Notice how this handle's got a pivot point right in the middle. It bounces back and forth like that. Make sure to grab it right in the middle and keep it neutral on that pivot. Otherwise, you're going to get an inaccurate reading as you're turning. Spec on this bolt is 55 pound-feet. And there it is. So we're all set here. Now what we're going to do is lower the car, bolt the top up, and we put the wheel on. All right, with our shock in and our suspension bolted back together, we can put the bolts back into the top of the shock tower. And with that, we'll be pretty much done. We can just drop our nuts right on top, run them down. Just run them down finger tight. Hit them real quick with the socket, but as always, consult your manual for the proper torque spec. There's 25 there. So now this is all set. Remember, these are adjustable, so we've got this protective boot on the top of it. The top of the shock, you can see a little tab here. That corresponds to the bottom little slot here in this knob. Now what this does, this is now an adjustable shock. There are 3 settings. The first and lowest is it feels like a lot like the factory ride, but if you crank it up 1 or 2 notches, the dampers are stiffer on rebound, so it'll be a little bit sportier. It's not a whole lot, but you'll definitely feel the difference. All right, with the shock all bolted up at the top, we can put our tire back on. And we're rounding the finish on this particular job. couple more. And once we get the tire in place, we can drop the car down and give it a try. Now, since these are adjustable shocks, we'll want to make sure everything's settled down first, and then we can play with the suspension, see what we like. As we said before, that's adjusted in the trunk. All right, we'll torque those down, drop the car, and give it a test drive, see how it feels. If I like it, great. If I don't, well, now I can adjust it. And don't forget, if you have any questions about this job or any other that you've seen, leave us a question in the comments or send me an email. We'll be happy to answer them in a chat session.